was just right for us because we were trying to do this project sort of out of sight because we weren't too sure it was going to work.
Picture the deepest hole on the entire planet. A crack in the seafloor that is so deep that if you dropped Mount Everest into it, the peak of the mountain would still be more than a kilometer underwater. Inside that hole, there is total darkness, freezing cold, and pressure heavy enough to crush a submarine in an instant. That is the Mariana Trench. For most of history, we knew nothing of what goes on down there. However, for the first time in history, we now have actual, real footage of the trench. And what the cameras showed were life forms that we have never seen before. A living, breathing organism thriving in conditions that were supposed to make life physically impossible. This is the real story of the Mariana Trench, the footage that broke a century of assumptions, and why scientists are still trying to explain what is actually surviving down there. Let's get into it. The deepest place on Earth. 200 miles southwest of the island of Guam, in the western Pacific Ocean, the seafloor drops away into a massive scar in the Earth's crust called the Mariana Trench. This place was first discovered in 1875 by the crew of the British survey ship HMS Challenger. They used weighted rope to measure the depth of the trench, which came to about 8,000 meters. They did not have advanced technology to accurately measure how deep the trench was. That happened in 1951, when a Royal Navy vessel, the HMS Challenger II, used modern echolocation technology to measure its depth. They discovered its lowest point lies nearly 10,935 meters below the surface, nearly 7 miles straight down from the surface of the sea. This was named the Challenger Deep. To put it in perspective, Mount Everest, the tallest mountain on Earth, is 8,848.86 meters above sea level. It is more than 2,000 meters shorter than the Challenger Deep. When the trench was discovered and confirmed as the deepest place on Earth, scientists immediately got to work on making vessels that could go all the way to its seabed. And in January 1960, they succeeded. Swiss engineer Jacques Piccard and U.S. Navy Lieutenant Don Walsh rowed a steel vessel called the Trieste all the way to the bottom. The descent took 5 hours, and once they landed, the sediment clouded the water so badly that they could see almost nothing. They only stayed at the bottom for 20 minutes before coming back up. Then, for the next 52 years, nobody went back down. But it was not for lack of trying. A Japanese remote vehicle called Kaiko reached the bottom in 1995, then was lost at sea. An American vehicle called Nereus also reached the bottom in 2009 before imploding. The equipment sent to study the seafloor was getting destroyed before it could give any meaningful results. That is the real reason nobody had a clear picture of what lived down there. Scientists had no way to see what lay down there. Specially designed vehicles would implode or get lost before they could give any meaningful footage. And when these machines, which were specifically made to go down there, could not survive at that atmospheric pressure, scientists assumed that nothing could. The empty desert theory. This is the explanation scientists settled on for most of the 20th century. The deepest parts of the ocean are basically empty, cold deserts. Only a handful of specialized scavengers survive down there. Sunlight cannot reach down further than 200 meters. And without sunlight, nothing natural can grow. Everything alive below that line has to depend on food falling from far above. Things like dead plankton, fish remains, and tiny drifting particles that oceanographers call marine snow. But the deeper that material sinks, the more of it gets eaten or broken down along the way. By the time anything reaches 7 miles down, there's almost nothing left to eat. The logic checked out. There was just one problem. They had no evidence to support this theory. Not because they hadn't tried, but because no vehicle or submersible could survive at the extreme pressure in the Challenger Deep. At sea level, you carry roughly 1 atmosphere of pressure. Every 10 meters you go down adds another. By the time you reach the deep, that pressure passes 1,000 atmospheres. This kind of pressure crushes a human body instantly. Nobody could stay down there long enough to check whether the theory was even true. All of that changed once scientists stopped trying to send people and started sending something simpler instead. Something that wouldn't get crushed to death by the atmospheric pressure nearly 11,000 meters below sea level. The machine that changed everything. Scientists understood that all we needed was footage from the bottom of the sea. We do not need to actually send people physically down there. This is where the lander comes into the picture. A deep-sea lander is perfect for this kind of operation. It is basically a steel frame that carries all the equipment needed to get the footage, such as a camera, lights, and bait. You drop a lander over the side of a ship and let it sink to the seafloor. The camera films whatever shows up in its field of vision. Hours later, it releases its weights on a preset timer and floats back up to the surface. No pilot needed. No pressure hull rated for a human passenger. Just a machine built to sit still and watch. Starting in the early 2000s, marine biologist Alan Jameson began using landers across every major deep ocean trench on the planet. He studied the Mariana, the Kermadec, the Japan Trench, the Tonga Trench, and others. And what the footage revealed did not match the old assumption at all. The seafloor was not empty. It was crowded. Within minutes of a lander touching down, animals started showing up. Within an hour, the bait was gone. The main scavengers turned out to be amphipods. These are pale, shrimp-like crustaceans, some growing up to nearly a foot long at these depths. One single fish trap, lowered into the Tonga Trench, came back, holding more than 17,000 of them. 17,000 animals in one trap at a depth where almost nothing was supposed to be able to survive. When researchers studied its biology, they found something nobody expected. It produces an enzyme capable of breaking down plant fiber, wood, and leaves. This is the kind of terrestrial debris that occasionally drifts all the way down from the surface. A crustacean living at the deepest point on Earth had evolved the ability to digest wood. And the amphipods were only the first sign of something even stranger swimming through that same darkness. Fish that shouldn't exist. For decades, scientists believed fish simply could not survive below around 8,000 meters. Not because of a lack of food, but because of nature itself. Under that much pressure, proteins start to lose their shape and stop functioning. Cell membranes stiffen. The basic biological machinery begins to fail. In 2014, Jameson's team filmed a small, pale, almost see-through fish gliding along the bottom of the Mariana Trench. It was a snailfish, soft-bodied and unassuming. It looks nothing like the toothy monsters people usually picture when they think of deep-sea creatures. In 2017, the same team filmed another snailfish even further down than the first. It was then formally identified as a new species named Pseudoleparus swirrii. The next sighting was in August of 2022, during an expedition to the trenches around Japan. The same research group filmed a juvenile snailfish in the Izu Ogasawara Trench at a staggering 8,336 meters. That sighting is now the deepest a vertebrate has ever been recorded alive. A few days later, on the same trip, the team actually captured 2 related snailfish specimens in the nearby Japan Trench. These are the deepest living fish ever physically pulled out of the ocean. Naturally, the question that comes to mind is this the limit beyond which a fish's biology cannot survive? Or are there even more fish living further down in the trenches that we simply have not discovered yet? Researchers have finally answered that question. The biological limit. Deep-sea fish survive crushing pressure using a molecule called TMAO. This compound helps stabilize proteins so they do not collapse under weight that would destroy ordinary tissue. Scientists have found that the deeper a fish lives, the more TMAO it carries in its cells. The snailfish living near the bottom of these trenches carry the highest concentrations ever measured in any fish on the planet. But TMAO has its own limit. Past a certain depth and atmospheric pressure, instead of protecting proteins, it starts harming them. That limit sits somewhere between about 8,200 and 8,500 meters. The snailfish filmed at 8,336 meters in the Izu-Ogasawara Trench is sitting almost exactly on that boundary. It may represent close to the absolute deepest point any backboned animal can physically survive. Vertebrates simply cannot survive the extreme pressure that is present at such depths. The snailfishes surviving at more than 8,000 meters depth are a snapshot of biology functioning at its absolute limit. And these fishes are not even the strangest thing the expeditions have documented. In the layer of ocean below 6,000 meters, there are many different trenches and unique environments. This is called the Hadal Zone. Here, each trench sits isolated from its neighbors. Because of that isolation, each trench has slowly built its own separate community of life. An ecosystem in the depths. In Challenger Deep alone, cameras have documented entire fields of xenophyophores, giant single-celled organisms. Some of them are even larger than a human fist. They have built intricate structures out of solid grains of sediment. These are some of the largest one-celled organisms known to science, and there are thousands of them scattered across the trench floor. Footage has revealed sea cucumbers crawling slowly across the sediment, feeding on the thin organic film coating every grain. Translucent worms are pressure-adapted relatives of starfish that occasionally drift into camera range. Many of them have never been formally classified. Nobody has ever managed to study them. That is partly because of just how isolated each trench really is. The creatures down there adapt to survive one specific trench's environment. Crossing across entire plains to reach the next trench is not really an option. Once a species adapts to life at the bottom of a trench in the Mariana, it is stuck there. That isolation is part of why researchers keep finding animals in one trench that simply do not exist anywhere else on the planet. Each trench is a separate ecosystem, a phenomenon of survival that has been running for millions of years. Between 2024 and 2025, an international research effort released the most complete survey on microorganisms ever conducted in the Hadal Zone. Researchers collected over 1,600 sediment samples from a depth of 6,000 to 11,000 meters. When they analyzed the genetic material in those samples, they identified more than 7,500 microbial species, and close to 90% of them had never been described anywhere in science. Researchers studying this survey have pointed out that discovering thousands of new species in a single environment is already unusual. Finding so many of them that carry genuinely novel survival strategies is extraordinary. The deepest place on Earth was never the empty desert scientists once assumed. It was an entire hidden city, quietly functioning under more than 10,000 meters of water, which raises an obvious question. If sunlight cannot reach down here and no natural growth can occur, then where are the organisms down there even getting food and nourishment from? 3 main energy sources. Researchers now believe at least 3 separate factors were underestimated in the old model of a starving deep ocean. First, food does not always drift down slowly and evenly. Occasionally, something large falls all at once, such as a whale carcass or a mass die-off of fish or plankton. These events deliver a concentrated burst of nutrition that scavengers on the seafloor can feed on and store as energy for months afterward. Second, the shape of a trench works something like a funnel. Organic material drifts down across a wide stretch of open ocean. It gets channeled towards the narrow trench openings on the floor below. That means trenches like the Mariana actually receive more food overall than a flat stretch of seabed sitting at the same depth. Third, and this is probably the most surprising piece, some of the energy fueling life down there is not coming from the surface at all. The single-celled organisms at the bottom appear to be pulling energy directly from chemical reactions happening in the seafloor itself. This is a process called chemosynthesis. In simple terms, these organisms are using the rocks to generate their own energy. Scientists have been studying the Mariana Trench for more than 50 years. But this was something that no one had ever considered possible. Researchers and marine biologists were left genuinely shocked. And while the researchers were analyzing evidence and coming to these conclusions, a small number of explorers were making their own trips down to see it firsthand. Journeys to the bottom. In March of 2012, filmmaker James Cameron piloted a custom-built submersible called the Deep Sea Challenger down into the Mariana Trench. He became the third person ever to reach the bottom, and the first to go down completely alone. Cameron's dive was not a casual side project. He spent years developing the Deep Sea Challenger specifically for that one descent. He worked with engineers to solve problems nobody had faced since the original Trieste dive in 1960. And even with all of that preparation, he almost didn't make it back out alive. A hydraulic fluid leak damaged some of his equipment during the descent, and a thruster failed on the way back up. And yet, he still came out with the most detailed visual record of the trench floor that existed at the time. Then, in 2019, explorer Victor Vescovo went even further. He piloted a submersible called the Limiting Factor and descended to the bottom on 3 separate occasions, spending hours on the bottom across these dives. During one of those dives, Vescovo's cameras spotted something that did not belong to any species on Earth at all: a plastic bag, candy wrappers, fragments of foil. Microplastics are now present in sediment at the very bottom of the Mariana Trench. This is the deepest place on our planet. More people have set foot on the moon than visited the Mariana Trench, and it is already carrying traces of human garbage. The same currents that carry food down into these trenches have also been carrying our waste. Plastic has even turned up inside the digestive tracts of the amphipods that have been thriving down there for tens of millions of years. This was one of Vescovo's biggest finds, and his project did not stop at the Mariana. He started the 5 Deeps expedition that set out to reach the lowest point of all 5 oceans. And he succeeded. This made the Limiting Factor, Vescovo's submersible, the only vehicle to ever visit the seafloor of all 5 oceans. Following this passion, he later founded a company called Caladan Oceanic. Since then, the Caladan has logged more total time at the bottom of the Mariana Trench than every previous expedition in human history combined. That accumulated time is exactly why so many new species and behaviors have surfaced in such a short window. It is not that the trench suddenly became more interesting. For the first time, someone was actually down there long enough to notice. And the story doesn't end there. In 2023, researchers isolated a previously unknown virus from sediment at nearly 8,900 meters deep in the Mariana Trench. This is the deepest virus ever recovered from anywhere on the planet. This is why every expedition is so important in the bigger picture. There are ongoing Japanese research programs, Chinese deep submersible missions, and continued dives using the Limiting Factor. Each of these journeys to the bottom of the Mariana Trench keeps adding new species, new behaviors, and new questions to the record. and the implications reach much, much further than just this one trench. Complex life is genuinely thriving at thousands of atmospheric pressure, in total darkness, on a food supply that should be nowhere near sufficient for living organisms. This discovery shows us that similar conditions elsewhere in the solar system might not rule out life either. Scientists have been studying Europa, a moon of Jupiter, and Enceladus, a moon of Saturn. Both of these are believed to hide liquid oceans beneath thick shells of ice. The Mariana Trench is the closest real-world comparison we have for what those alien oceans might actually be like. NASA's astrobiology research has started referencing Hadal Zone studies directly when trying to predict what future missions to those icy moons might realistically find. There is a more immediate benefit closer to home too. The biochemistry that lets trench life survive these extreme conditions represents a library of biological solutions that researchers in medicine and biotechnology are only just beginning to study. The deepest hole on Earth was never the empty wasteland science assumed it to be. It turned out to be one of the most densely packed, least explored ecosystems ever documented. And we are only starting to understand what is actually living down there. For most of history, science assumed the deepest parts of the ocean were nearly lifeless. Just a cold, dark desert with barely enough food to support anything at all. Modern cameras and landers have completely overturned that idea. So, what do you think is still waiting to be discovered down there? Let me know your thoughts about this in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next mystery we dig into. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.